Hello and welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast with your hosts Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Join us for conversations and interviews on the topics of apologetics, evangelism, and the Christian worldview.
Once again, the eyes of the nation have turned here to this tiny village in western Pennsylvania, blah, 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 blah.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Brian Auten.
And I'm Chad Gross.
And joining us today is Robby Lashua. He's here to talk about an initiative called STR Outposts. Now, normally we record these things before the interview, but this one we're recording after because, hey, we got caught up and we didn't have time. But I'm really glad that happened because I'm really pumped about this interview. It was super enjoyable, but it made me think, wow, this is such an amazing initiative. It makes me want to start one in my own church. But, if you think about training yourself to address the issues that are happening in culture and being able to equip Christians to defend the faith and give them tools and training they need to share and defend their faith in the culture, the Stand to Reason Outposts, what an excellent way to do that. So, Chad, tell us a little bit about the interview.
Yeah, so I have been kicking around the idea of approaching my pastor about starting either a Reasonable Faith chapter or an STR outpost or something along those lines. And so we reached out to Robbie and they graciously accepted, and he came on and we were able to talk about what exactly an STR outpost is, which generically is an apologetic small group. Also, what are the requirements to start one? And the supports that STR offers, which are many, I might say. And finally, what to do if perhaps your church is a bit reluctant or your pastor is a bit reluctant to begin. And yeah, I, like you, Brian, was very impressed of the user friendliness of the program. I think the program is so needed, and I totally agree with Robbie in one of the statements he made, many of the statements he made, but particularly one that sticks out. He said that, churches that don't start to embrace apologetics and engage in apologetics are going to begin to die because these are questions that people are asking, and we, the church, need to have answers. And I think STR Outpost is a great way to provide those answers to lay people. And so, yeah, this is an interview that I hope listeners will take to heart. I hope that they'll consider starting one in their own church. And yeah.
Super interview, really enjoyable. Thank you, Robbie, for that. Let's go to the show notes for the details and find out more at str.org. Let's go to the interview.
Let's get ready. Switch me on.
Well, Robby Lashua, thanks for joining us for the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is great.
All right, well, you're part of the ministry of Stand to Reason. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved and what your role is there?
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story. It goes back to COVID, right? Because everything starts with COVID now. So during that whole thing, I was doing a lot of hikes. I live in Arizona and I like to hike a lot. So, couldn't do anything else. So I was outside a lot, praying a lot, thinking a lot. And in Arizona, there's not really a lot of apologetics ministries at all. And so I thought, maybe it's time for me just to start an apologetics ministry. I'd been in church. I'd been a pastor for 15 years, youth pastor. Then I was pastor of apologetics at my church. But yeah, I just felt like I want to do apologetics kind of full time. And so praying about it, talking with people about it, my pastor, my wife, And so I started to create my own ministry. I was getting my nonprofit status. One of my friends, man, he gave me branding for my website. He was making me an app. He was making me the website, all free. It was awesome. Wow. So we're going full board into this thing. And my church gave me a year where I could stay on staff and keep doing my job, but I could have a year to get everything ready before I launched. And so I'm in the middle of that. And I was talking with Alan Schleman a lot because we've been friends for a while. And just asking him, I know how to do a church, but what is a parachurch organization, nonprofit business model? And so he was talking me through how STR does things. And a few months into this process, Alan calls me out of the blue and says, hey, so I was talking with Greg, and would you consider having a conversation with us about maybe coming and just working at STR instead of inventing your own thing? Because you're kind of like-minded with us. We already have the infrastructure, and you could just come right on board and start doing ministry, unless you want to be an entrepreneur and create a thing. And I don't want to do that. That was the worst part. I just want to get to ministry, right?
Right.
So I talked with my wife, talked to my pastor, prayed about it, thought about it. And I was like, this is crazy. And never in my wildest dreams would I think I'd work at STR. It's kind of still surreal to me after 2.5 years. But yeah, so Alan and Greg drove out to my house in Phoenix, and for a day they pitched to me the future of STR and why they want me to work there. And so, we prayed about it. And then I started working there in 2022. So January 1st, 2022 was my first day with STR. So that's kind of how it happened. And then what I do is, I'm an apologist and a speaker, a content creator. So I do STRU courses. I speak around the country. I write blogs, all that stuff. But one of the things that is unique to my role is I am the Outpost coordinator. And so Outposts are our version of chapter groups in local churches across the world. And it's really providing small group curriculum for people to take their church members through and disciple them in good apologetics. And so we've been running that for a year and a half now. And we have 120 outposts worldwide. We're in 5 different countries. Wow. We're in 33 states. So it's been going great, and a lot of people are getting discipled in apologetics through these outposts.
So you said something. I'm going to go back a little bit, and this doesn't directly relate to what we're going to talk about today, which is the STR Outpost for listeners who are interested. Did I catch you correctly that you said that you were a pastor of apologetics?
Yeah, that was my title at my church. So I was youth pastor there for 6 years, and one of the things our church, man, my senior pastor, I still go to the same church even though I don't work there anymore. I still go there. I'm an elder there. I love that church, and our senior pastor's been there for 28 years, and he started this thing there called SMI, Student Missionary Internship. And it's basically that every year with our high school group, we don't go to camps, we go on a mission trip, but they have to complete a long training period. It's from February 1st through June. They need to do training every week. They got to memorize scripture. They got to read books. There's about 15 different things they have to pass with 80% or better, or they can't go on the trip. And so when I got there, this thing had been going, for 19 years, 18 years. And so I came in and I said, well, kids need apologetics. So I started doing apologetics trips. We went to Berkeley with Brett Kunkel and did an atheist trip. I took kids to Salt Lake City to do Mormon apologetics. And so we were doing this. And what happened was parents would come to me upset because they'd say, my kid's inviting Mormon missionaries over to our house all the time, and they're debating with them and talking with them and showing them the truth, and the Mormons have nothing to say. And I don't know this stuff as the parent. Like, where's the training for me? And so I started teaching adult classes at church, right? I started doing kind of the big apologetics issues, problem of evil, resurrection, LGBTQ stuff, hermeneutics. It kind of blossomed into, okay, maybe you could do this full time. So that's what I started doing. I became an associate, right? And I was over all adult education. I taught apologetics classes. I preached second most out of anybody on staff. And then I created a podcast. I had a podcast for the church called Christ, Culture, and Coffee. And I think we almost had 200 episodes. So it was weekly podcasts just on apologetics issues like what you guys are doing. Interviewing Gary Habermas and Greg Kokel and, all the top guys. And it was a really cool time for me just to focus on apologetics and how it could work with lay people in the church. And that's why I think this Outpost thing is so cool, because I've done it and I think pretty successfully trained a lot of people in the church. We even started doing adult mission trips with apologetics emphasis. And then now I'm just trying to replicate that, other places through Outposts. So it was definitely a unique role. And I don't want it to sound like all I did was apologetics. It's like when you work at a church, you do a bunch of different stuff. Like I was over the Mercy Care Ministries and, all of those types of things. But yeah, I primarily got to focus on training our people in apologetics.
Yeah, and I'm going to avoid a soapbox here. I just wanted to ask you to explain that a bit, just because I think that just is a position that is becoming more and more critical, especially in our culture today. And so pastors, if you're listening, that might be something you want to pitch to your church, to maybe have some apologists on staff or an apologist on staff, because I think you're going to find much fruit from it. So let's dig into Outposts. So you talked a little bit about what they are, about what the purpose of them is. Feel free to expound on that more if you'd like. But let's imagine somebody wants to start one of these outposts, what kind of steps should they take?
Yeah, so we really want to be connected with the local church. So that's important to us. These aren't, silos of home groups that just do apologetics for what I call apologetics junkies. Right. And we all know those guys. Like I'm you guys, like I love apologetics. Yep. But this isn't just about becoming smarter for becoming smarter's sake. I feel like one of the things that I really am afraid of or I don't want to happen with Outposts is I don't want it to be a place where people come and hear really cool info and then do nothing with it. And that's one of the dangers of Sunday school or Christian apologetics is it can just become a new form of Christian entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that. I want people to hear this and it propel them into life change so that they're reaching their community and training up their kids well. And so we want it to be connected with a local church. And all that means is that the church provides a place for them to meet. Now, if it's, a home group through the church's home groups, that's great. If it's a Sunday school, that's great. If it's a once a month event at the church, we've created this to be flexible because we want to be all around the country, all around the world. And every place has different cultures and contexts and how churches run ministries. So we made it to be really flexible in that way. And so if somebody wants to start one, what they have to do is go to our website, str.org. Under the training tab, there's a little thing you can click for Outposts, and then there's a Start an Outpost. And there's other info on there. They could look up where they're all at. They could look up what it's about. There's a video intro thing. But then they just fill out a form. It probably takes, 4 or 5 minutes to start an Outpost, and they apply. And then what that'll do is it'll kick them an automated email with all the requirements that they have to fulfill to start one. And it's not hard, but it might take a little time. So what we require is that people read Greg Koukl's book, The Story of Reality. And then there's a questionnaire that comes with that. There's one question per chapter that I have them answer and send me their answers. They have to send me their testimony of faith. They have to send me 2 references I can check with them on, one of them being a pastor at the church. And then they have to agree with the Stand to Reason statement of faith. And so that's the application process. Once people send me all their documents, then I meet with them on Zoom. We talk through what it looks like to open an Outpost. I give them the keys to the kingdom and the curriculum, and then they're ready to go. In addition to running their Outpost, we also have Zoom meetings occasionally with different regions just to talk about how things are going, what's working well, what's not. And then we have an annual in-person conference that's completely exclusive, actually, to Outpost directors. And so once a year, we invite them all to come to Southern California, and all of the guys at STR, we put on a conference with insider information for them because they're teaching our stuff, right? Like we're not going to have Koukl do tactics to these people who are teaching tactics to everyone at the church.
Right.
So we do new stuff we haven't done before, insider information, because we want to keep them up to date on what's coming and how they can effectively disciple their people. And so, if someone wants to start it, you go to the website, you apply, you have to talk with your church and make sure they're cool with doing this. And we really want to incorporate it into what the church already does. Like I said, if Sunday school is a big thing, hey, you can run this as a Sunday school. If small groups are a thing and this would fit in with that, you can run it as a small group. I even know some churches who take like 5 or 6 of the big apologetics topics and they just put them on a rotation because they want everyone in the church to go through those 5 or 6 topics.
That's a good idea.
And so it's pretty easy to start. We didn't want to make it too hard, but I did have to have some kind of vetting process for people just to make sure if our name's on it, that things are going well and that people are qualified to lead them.
Robbie, you mentioned there, making it sort of like a form of a Sunday school or things like that. Tell us a little bit about some of the outposts that are out there, because we've talked to different ministries that have sort of chapters and things like that, and we find those to be very useful options that people might explore if they're looking to get apologetics in their church or their communities and things like that. And so it could be in a church, but it can also be in different settings. So give us some rundown of sort of like what variety you might find these groups at.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are run out of churches as a small group or a class. Some of them run as like an 8-week class in the fall, 8-week class in the spring. It just depends on every region because church attendance and church classes are different depending on the culture that you're in, around the country and around the world. And so there's so many different ways people run them. Some people do a once a month apologetics night, and that's where they do Outpost. So it really depends on the schedule of the director, and we emphasize fit it in with what the church is already doing. We don't want to make this a burden on the church. We want it to be a benefit. And if we can fit into what they already do and their flow of ministry and their seasons and their schedules, then that's a huge win for us. And that's why we made them so flexible, is so that people can fit them in to what their church is already doing. When I was working at a church, there's so many parachurch organizations that want to be in your church. You get mailers all the time and calls and drop-ins, and it gets quite annoying after a while. But the worst was when people would act like, if you're not doing our program, you're not doing church right. And that's just completely not true. The church is really important, very important. It's God's vehicle to reach the world and to change culture and to equip the saints. And so if we can come alongside and help that, awesome. But you know what? There's some churches that already do really well at apologetics. And to start an Outpost might just be more of the same thing. So it's definitely not something that every church has to have. But as you know, the deficiency of good apologetics training is so prevalent in the American church that we really want to impact people with it. And our target audience for these, because there's a difference. Like, I've met with Tyson James, from Reasonable Faith. He's in charge of their chapter groups. I love what they're doing. That is so awesome. Outposts are different than that, because Reasonable Faith is like kind of high level apologetics philosophy. What Outposts are targeted at is training lay people in the church. That's really our goal, is like people who've never heard of apologetics. This is for you. How do you talk about homosexuality in the Bible with your kids? How do you talk about transgenderism? How do you know that Jesus rose from the dead? We're really targeting lay people in the church who love Jesus and read their Bibles and come to church, but they're not equipped to compete in the marketplace of ideas and culture. So that's who we're targeting. That's kind of what we're going after.
That's really great that you mentioned that, because we have talked to different folks on the podcast. We've talked to Tyson James, and we're all for all of those things. But we want to present people, what are all the different options for me? And so clearly, there's some people who are going to really latch onto that. Oh yeah, Reasonable Faith chapter. That's totally my thing. I love the work of William Lane Craig or something like that. But it's not. It is clearly not accessible to everyone. Some people are just going to be like, that's the last thing for me, because that's over my head or something. But I like what you're saying there, because basically saying, hey, the entire culture is dealing with these issues, and this is for everybody in your church to bring it down to everyone's level and make it accessible. So I think that's super. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because the last thing we want people to think is that, oh, well, here's something that's people can't imagine themselves being able to reach for or, facilitate or something like that. They're not. This is just going to be over people's heads. No, exactly the opposite.
Yeah, exactly the opposite. Well, and to be honest with you, so like I've interviewed all of our 120 Outpost directors, and so we have some of them who have PhDs in philosophy and apologetics, right? So that's one side of the spectrum. And then we have people who heard about apologetics 2 weeks ago at a conference, and they're like, my church needs this. And the beauty of Outpost is it's so turnkey. People on all spectrums can take it and start implementing it at their church right away, which is really, that's what I wanted. I didn't want it to be hard for people to use.
So what I hear you saying is if there's somebody listening right now and they're thinking, wow, this is great. I think my church needs something like this, but I'm not an apologetics expert. I don't know a whole lot of apologetics. If I understand you correctly, you're saying that should not hold them back.
No, it shouldn't hold them back, because here's how the curriculum works. What we use for the curriculum is our STRU courses. So we have 24 of these courses now, and we create 1 to 2 new courses every quarter. So we are outpacing how fast we go, how fast people can go through them. But the course is kind of a misnomer. It's not like a college course, right, where there's 17 hours of lecture. It's nothing like that. Each course, most of them are kind of formalized at 5 videos that are between 8 to 15 minutes long each. And so not tons and tons of content. The one complaint I got from a lot of people I interviewed about apologetics in their church, first of all, if they had it, right? So it's tough finding people who have apologetics in the church.
Which is not a lot, but yeah.
It's not, yeah. They would all say, first of all, I don't know where this has been all my life. I love it. Why haven't we known more about this? So first of all, positive experience. But the one negative I kept hearing is, but there was just so much information. I wish I could remember it. And every apologetics conference I go to, people say, yeah, I know it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, right? It's so much information coming at you. And that's the danger of apologetics is it is information heavy because that's what it is. It's content, it's information, it's arguments. And so I was thinking, how can we not scare away lay people with this ministry, right? Because we want them having a steady diet of this. And so how it works is with our STRU courses, again, each video's, 8 to, I think the shortest video we have is 2 minutes. The longest one we have is 19 minutes. So a group comes together, they watch one video from the course, not the whole course, just one video, they take 10 minutes, they watch it. And then we've created small group curriculum to go with that, discussion guides where there's questions, where there's exercises, where there's homework. And that's really the bread and butter of it, because if people can watch a little and talk a lot, they'll be able to retain the information. So that's kind of our methodology. It's more of a marathon type ministry than a sprint ministry. That's why I don't have any certificate of achievement. I'm not trying to get people to blitz through this. That is not the goal. The goal is to have this at the church as a place where people can come ask their questions, get their doubts answered, or be directed to somebody or some organization who can help them with their questions.
I like that too, because unfortunately we don't read as much as we used to, right? Just as a culture as a whole. And so I think that makes it more digestible too. But I love that aspect as well. Is it making it easier to, if you dive in, if you do a little bit and you do a deep dive, you're going to be more apt to remember it. So I like that. Now, as far as resources go, let's say someone starts an STR Outpost. Are they committed to using exclusively STR resources? Are they allowed to supplement with other materials? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how it works. So that's one of the things I've been working
if
through.
You don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
We're figuring this out as it goes,
Sure.
And so okay, we love what William Lane Craig does, right? We love what Turek does at Cross Examined. We love, there's all these organizations, reasons to believe, all of them. It's great. We study that stuff. We use their resources. And so I've kind of just not really said what people are supposed to do with that. And I know Outpost directors who will supplement, and they'll show a Bobby Conway video to open the thing. Great. Like I don't have any problem with that. But as STR, I'm trying to think through what are the guardrails I should put up so things don't go off the rails. But the other side of it, guys, is this isn't Stand to Reason's ministry. This is God's ministry. This is God's church. These are God's people. And I don't want to be cavalier or reckless with that. But the truth of it is we're providing a tool for people to use in the local church. And there's other tools out there that are good. So I don't want to be territorial or say only use our stuff, because there's a lot of other good stuff. But I'm also trying to formalize, if our name's on it, how do we, not go off the rails? So, Chad, it's a great question. I wish I had an answer.
No, that's...
Well, I have the answer.
No, I understand that. And I appreciate the transparency and just being real. I mean, it is kind of a new ministry, and if there's not a hard, fast answer, that's okay. And I hear you saying that there is some freedom. I'm just assuming that, the materials that are used, if they're brought in from another ministry, should at least be consistent with, for example, the mission statement of STR and the church.
Yeah, and that's where the people have to sign our mission statement. And it's a mere Christianity. We don't get into doctrinal distinctives, right? We're just very basic. This is classical Christianity. And so people have to agree to that. And I've interviewed people who don't agree with our doctrinal statement. And sometimes it's they don't understand something or a little nuance. But one time I had a guy reach out to me, and he said, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I don't believe in the Trinity. Is that going to be a problem? And I said, yeah, that's going to be a huge problem. Like, you can't be an Outpost director.
Sorry.
And you really should reconsider your position. And I did an STRU course on the Trinity, right? So I sent him the link. I'm like, you probably should watch this, man, because it's pretty important and it's scriptural. We do deny people if they don't agree. But that's not like the age of the earth. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. That's pretty essential. It is. Well, and the other thing too is, and this, because I think this is important, is we're not going to create STRU courses about doctrinal distinctives. We're never going to have one called Modes of Baptism or Are the Signs Gifts for Today, because that's not our thing. We're dealing with apologetics. And we have already an Outpost. You know, we have Calvaries, we have Methodists, we have Presbyterian, we have Lutheran, we have Assemblies of God. I've got some hyper charismatic churches out in the South. We have Baptists, Southern Baptists, you know, Conservative Baptists, all these different denominations within Protestantism, Anglican. And I think, I could be wrong about this, I don't know what you guys think, but I think that the local church is supposed to indoctrinate their people. I think that's the goal. Like, this is where we land on end times stuff. This is where we land on signs, gifts. They should be transparent and indoctrinate their people with their doctrinal distinctives, with their denominational distinctives. I think that's great. And so as stand to reason to come in and say, hey, you know, some of us don't like this open-handed issue within Christianity. You know, that's not our role with apologetics. And so we do leave flex for them to teach their doctrinal distinctives within their outposts according to what their church is, because I think we are subservient to the church. But at the same time, I do require 3 things of every outpost meeting. They have to watch one of our videos, they have to go through the discussion guide, and they have to take time to pray together. So if they show a Bobby Conway video or a Red Pen Logic video, you know, or Frank Turek or whatever, that's fine. But those are 3 things have to be happening on a consistent basis.
You mentioned the different curriculum and stuff. So let's say I sign up. I'm like, yeah, I'll be a director. And starting next week, what do the materials look like? Is it like, here's, you know, an outline, here's teaching outlines, or what does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so I have an Outpost Director's Handbook that I'd send you. I talk with you through all of the ins and outs of it, but there's not a schedule of events because each church and the people of each church are probably at a different place as to what they need to study. It's especially on regions of the country. I mean, all of that, regions of the world, right? And so I leave it up to the Outpost directors to pick which courses they want to do, as long as there's a discussion guide to go with it. Because I have to create the discussion guides because STRU existed prior to Outpost. And so I'm playing catch up on some of these courses. But as long as there's a discussion guide, they can pick whichever course they want to start with. They have the prerogative to pick when they redo a course, you know, because these ministries are cyclical. You're going to have people coming in and out. And so you might get to a place and say, man, we need to go through the resurrection again because these people weren't here for that. And so I leave that up to each individual Outpost director when they should do that. But there is no set schedule of the curriculum and the order you need to go through it in.
Okay, so for instance, I have in the past run a Reasonable Faith chapter. And so now it was one of the very first ones. And so maybe they've got a lot more resources and helps now. But the way I would run things would be like, well, I think I'll teach this. And here I'm going to come up with I'm going to have to make the PowerPoint. I'm going to have to select videos. It was autonomous at the time. Now, as I say, there's more materials now for something like that. But it sounds, am I getting it right when I say, oh, if it's an STR outpost, it's kind of like, oh, here's the topic, resources are provided, and we're going to go through this material, this set material, and we're going to talk about a video, and we're going to talk about, and we have a discussion guide to go through it. So it's basically plug and play. Is that right? Wow,
it's completely
that's great.
Plug and play, and we made it simple like that. So again, people who are well versed in apologetics, like again, if you guys started one, so you 2 guys who know this stuff, you wouldn't even have to look at it before you used it. Like, I mean, you might want to, but you wouldn't have to. You could just roll into church, play the video, and then go through the questions. It's pretty user friendly.
That's great because that's, you know, for me, that's a barrier to entry, you know, because am I quote unquote qualified to do that? Yeah. But here's the barrier to entry for me, starting some group or something in my church. Do I have the time to put together PowerPoints?
Exactly.
I have the ability. I don't have the time or the bandwidth. But if we're going to be at church anyway, no problem talking about this. No problem facilitating this. Oh, STR has plug and play resources. Snap that up because we could get this started tomorrow. You know, that's wonderful. I am so thrilled to hear that because I knew about the STR outposts and I just was like, oh, it must be another sort of chapter thing. You know, my ignorance, and I haven't looked into it. That's why you're here. But that's really encouraging. That's super. So I'm on board with that.
Pretty
That's
easy.
great.
One other thing too that I'll mention that we're going to be starting in the next month is so one of the things when I was pastor of apologetics and youth pastor, I noticed is that people will train harder if they know a test is coming, right? When I told kids we're going to Berkeley to talk with atheist professors, they studied really hard when we were training. Yeah. And same with parents, right? So what we're doing with Outposts is the second phase we're calling Outpost engagements. And it's just another tool for people to use to train their people. And what it is there's kind of 3 tiers to it. So the first tier is what we're calling, outreach engagement. And we've partnered with Ratio Christi. You guys are familiar with Ratio Christi, right? They're a big university apologetics organization. Well, they're in 190 campuses around the country. And so I was talking with Eric Scott, and what we've done is we partnered with them to where all of their directors that are on the college campus know about Outposts and know that our Outpost directors may be contacting them to take their Outpost people out on the campus to evangelize, to table with them, to get in conversations with non-believers. Because I think if you train them, hey, here's these 3 courses to go through on atheism, on, this and that. Now take your people to the local college and let them use their tactics, let them practice, and then come back and debrief. So we've partnered with Ratio Christi to make that work. We've also partnered with an organization called Justice for All, which is a pro-life organization that goes out on college campuses. So you could take your people through making abortion unthinkable, and then you could go practice at the college, right, with Justice for All. Now, I also know a lot of people get freaked out about that and never want to do it because it's scary. So the next tier of Outpost engagement is what I'm calling invitational engagement. And a lot of people, you guys probably know this, but a lot of people I talk to don't. I tell them, do you know you can order a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness online, like a pizza? Like you can just go, here's the website. You go say, I want a home visit. And they'll text you and say, let's set up a home visit.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we've got a lot of courses on, the Trinity. We've got some Tim did on Jesus' identity that directly attack Jehovah's Witness theology. And then I'm making a new course on witnessing to Mormons. And so people could go through that and then say, hey, the homework this week is to go order a Mormon and have an hour-long conversation with them at your house. And here's the guidelines. You don't drink coffee. You get donuts or cookies to give to them. You're nice and you're kind. You ask a lot of questions. Here's the witnessing techniques that we went through so they can go do it. And then as a group, we debrief. And I think that's really important. We talk about what worked well. What did you fumble on? What arguments did you hear that you weren't prepared for? What would you do different next time? And so this Outpost engagement thing, I'm pretty excited about because it's giving people the opportunity to use all the stuff they've been learning, and it's kind of pushing them out the door to go and to use it. So
that sounds outstanding. I love that.
Yeah.
Robbie, one of the things I've been pretty blessed over the years with meeting pastors who are open to apologetics in their church, but I know that not everybody has had that experience. So I'm wondering, how would you guide somebody, or what advice would you give to someone who are attending a church and perhaps their pastor or their church are reluctant to allow them to start something like an Outpost, or seem disinterested in apologetics, or don't see how vital it is? How would you, I guess, suggest they deal with that?
Well, I've had that happen a lot. Because one of the things I want people to do is talk with their pastors about this, before they go through everything and then get excited and then get rejected. I'd rather they got rejected up front. And so I've gotten multiple emails from people saying, my pastor's not on board. They don't think apologetics is important. And so how do I proceed? And what I do is I typically say, hey, listen, let me send you some of the curriculum to show them. Like this is what it is. Here's a list of the courses. Here's one discussion guide to show them this is the kind of thing that it is. Here's their website. So they, because as a pastor, I was always skeptical when people would say, hey, there's this great ministry out there and I want to use their stuff. I'm like, hold on. Because I'm the gatekeeper of theology at the church. Like, I don't want to just let anything in. So I try to affirm their pastor in that and say, hey, that's a good thing that they're not just like, yeah, do whatever. And then I say, go show them what this is and why it's important. And I even have a video to pastors about what it is and why it's important. And so a lot of times that's worked well, where the pastors go, wow, this is great stuff. I didn't know about STR, but what I'm seeing looks great. And so that's worked. Now, I do have some people who say, my pastor says we don't need to do apologetics because it's just an academic thing. And if we just preach the gospel, that's enough. And at that point, I say, hey, listen, you can't force your pastor to have a ministry in the church when he's in charge. There's nothing you can do. Now, if you want to have a home group, or if you want to do this at, another church, or you want to do this with a, collaboration of people at a community center or whatever, I'm okay with you doing that. But yeah, I wouldn't keep, annoying your pastor about it when he's pretty clear on he doesn't think apologetics is important.
Do you think maybe somebody in that situation who just really feels like God is directing him in that direction might, in some circumstances, consider finding another body that might be open to that?
Yeah, and I thought about that a lot, but I don't feel like, I don't know these people well enough to say, hey, you might want to find a different church.
Yes.
That's a big thing, right? So I don't ever say that to people. But I do say is, hey, maybe another church in your area would want to let you do this there. I'll suggest that.
What if they're a Unitarian Universalist?
Yeah. Or they're Mormon or whatever. Yeah, then I'll say you should go to the church, not to some cult. Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah. And I know that's a tricky question. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just, I think you're right, though. It would be a case by case basis, right? In some cases, it probably wouldn't be the right move. And in some cases, it might be the best move, but you can't give a universal yes or no with that.
Well, and I just don't know. If people ask me, what would you do in my situation? Because my pastor doesn't want to have apologetics here. I say, well, apologetics is commanded in scripture, so I'd go to a different church. But if they don't ask me, that's just a tough thing to do, right? You got families involved. And the honest truth is, I think if people don't start doing more apologetics in the church, those churches are going to die anyway, because they're not being effective and they're not giving people something. And so, but to tell someone, hey, you should change churches, I just don't know people well enough to do that through email.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And again, didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just curious what you thought about that.
No, I don't feel put on the spot. It's a great question.
Okay, good. And then kind of my last question that I had in mind, and by the way, this has been great, super helpful, and exactly what I was hoping for. So I just want to say that before I forget to mention that. I've taught enough apologetics classes in the time I've been a Christian to know that sometimes you encounter some difficult personalities. People get very passionate about doctrinal issues, and sometimes it can be difficult to know where to go. Let's imagine I'm running an outpost and I've got a personality in my class and I'm not exactly sure how to deal with him or her. And just for an example, let's go with, let's say, eschatology. There's a big discussion about eschatology, and I'm trying to say, hey, it's okay to have different views, and this person just won't allow that to rest. Is there is there something or somewhere where I can reach out to someone at STR and just say, hey, I am trying to deal with this person. I don't really know where to go. Can you counsel me? I know obviously you'd go to your pastor first, but I'm saying, is that also something that STR offers? And I'm thinking in situations that are more extreme, not the norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the last thing I tell every Outpost director in our meeting after they've been accepted and I've got all the references, and I walk them through how to run it. The last thing I always say is, hey, me and my secretary are a resource for you anytime you have a question about whatever, like you forgot a password. Email us. We get back to people regularly about that kind of stuff. If you're having a problem, if there's a theological issue that comes up, anything you need help with, difficult persons, contact us, because we are advocates for you. That's our job, is we want to make sure these run well and we set people up for success. And so if people have reached out to me about difficulties in their groups and how to manage a small group, right? And so I'll walk them through things I've done, things I've read about, but also talking about, hey, listen, Matthew 18 says this, you go to the person in private. If they don't listen, you take another, you might have to take it to the pastor and say they're being really difficult. But, also deciphering between, are they being difficult or are they just really excited about it and want to talk a lot, right? So helping people think through those things, especially if they haven't led a group before, it's kind of cool. But yeah, me and I got a secretary in January to help me answer all the emails because they're getting overwhelming. But we want to make sure we stay on top of it and we help people with what they need. So absolutely, yes. we are available for our Outpost directors to contact us anytime, really about anything.
I think that's great, especially something you said there is the main reason why, is because I could see somebody thinking, well, I've never led a small group, but if they know that they had you and your secretary to be able to reach out to with questions, especially initially, I think that would offer a lot of comfort and support and maybe make them more willing to do so. So it sounds like you guys just have a great program going, if I might say.
I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of what we've done. And, in a year and a half, we're up to 120 groups running,
That's outstanding.
And some people sometimes ask me too, like, well, there's some misconceptions about this whole thing. So some people say, well, is there already one in San Antonio? And I'll say, yeah, but I want to have like one in every church. It's not like each town gets one. Right. That's not the idea here. You can have them all over the place. You could have 4 of them in one church if the church is big enough. That's not the idea. So we want to have them all over. But then the other thing that they'll ask me is a lot of like, well, I'm not, I'm not qualified. I haven't gone to school for this. I haven't. And this is what I tell them all the time. None of us know everything, right? And you have to learn how to say, I don't know, but I know how to find out the answer. And if you can point people to STR.org or Cross-Examined or Reasonable Faith or whatever to find the answer, that's what we need happening in the church. For so long, people have asked questions or voiced their doubts only to be told, oh, just have more faith and be quiet about it. Well, you can't do that. And there's no excuse to, because there's so many resources like your website, like our website. People can go find the answer. So if you have one person in the church that can direct people to the resources, that's a home run. You don't have to know anything except where to go. Yeah. And so I try to help people understand that this isn't about being an expert. None of us know everything. And if you just start, and honestly, if you start leading these groups and you don't know much, you're going to learn a lot through the videos and through the discussion. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm hoping that it continues to grow. And as we develop more and more, we want to do more training with our people and have some intentional study, kind of a next level of leadership. So we've got plans for the future. But yeah, for this last year and a half, it's been going pretty well. Oh, one other thing. Sometimes people ask me, is there a certain size requirement? And I'm like, no. Like there's this couple in Maine. They've been running one out of their church. There are Christians in Maine, by the way. I didn't know if you guys knew that, but there are.
I thought that was like Bigfoot. Like everybody keeps claiming it, but
it's not an urban legend. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we actually have 2 outposts in Maine. Is that crazy? Wow. And this couple leads one in their church, and they have a few, 2-3 people from the church come. And then I've got other groups that have 80 people coming, right? And so it's just all over the map. And it's not the type of thing either where I'm asking for attendance. I'm not asking, did you ask question 3 on video 2? It's nothing like that. This is a tool we are giving the church to equip their people.
Excellent.
Well, it's been really informative and helpful, Robbie.
Yes.
Everything you've said is like, well, I could do that. That sounds really fun. So everything you've said has kind of been like quite exciting because it just, it makes your brain pop with the possibilities and the options. So I hope our listeners are having that same sort of stuff as they're listening too. So as we wrap up the interview, would you mind just pointing our listeners to where they might find out more and the resources they need to get started?
Yeah, so if you just go to our website, str.org/outposts, or you can just go to str.org and click on the training tab, and then Outposts will pop up. You go on there, there's a Find an Outpost where there's a whole map of the world where all of them are. There's a Start an Outpost tab where you can click to fill out the form and get started on your application. And then there's a video kind of explaining what it is. So that's the place to do it. And once you apply, you'll get that automated email with the requirements and you can get started on doing it.
Super. Well, Robbie, thanks for joining us for the interview. It's been a real pleasure, and we wish you all the best with STR and hope to talk to you again in the future about anything you're doing in the future, new initiatives. Let us know. We'd love to help promote that.
Oh, I love it, guys. And hey, I just wanted to tell you, it was probably for about a 5-year period, I had your page as my homepage when I'd open up my browser. Apologetics 315, that was always my thing because I'm always looking at the new stuff. So I appreciate what you guys do.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have a question you'd like us to address or just a message for us, feedback, good or bad, you can either email us at podcast@apologetics315.com or leave a voice message for us using SpeakPipe. Just go to speakpipe.com/apologetics315 to leave us a message. And remember, if you include a Ghostbusters quote in your question, we guarantee that we'll read it on the podcast. We also ensure up to 50% better quality answers. Also, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review in iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. And please share this episode with a friend if you found it useful. Remember, you can find lots of apologetics resources at apologetics315.com, along with show notes for today's episode. Find Chad's apologetic stuff over at Truthbomb Apologetics. That's truthbomb.blogspot.com. This has been Brian Oughton and Chad Gross for the Apologetics 315 podcast, and thanks for listening.